Hey everybody, Father Warner here. We are in Tuesday of the 10th week in Ordinary Time, and our text from the first reading is taken from the first book of Kings, chapter 17, verses 7 to 16. Now, I know we began studying the book of Kings somewhere in chapter 17. That's where the lectionary takes off, literally. So, just to give you a bit of an orientation, when you look at 1 Kings, chapter 1 to 11, you will realize that the first 11 chapters is about King Solomon and what is called the United Kingdom. After David came his son Solomon, and you find that this is one united kingdom. All the 12 tribes are united. But after Solomon's death, starting with his son who inherits the kingdom is now divided. So from chapter 12 to chapter 16, you will read about the kingdoms of Israel, the northern kingdom, which had it was called Israel, it had its capital in Samaria, and the southern kingdom, which was Judah, and its capital in Jerusalem. The southern kingdom consisted of 2 tribes, the northern kingdom consisted of the remaining 10 tribes. Now, our text today, if you remember in chapter 16, we come to King Ahab, and he, we are told, has lost favor of God. He's one of the most cruel and evil kings. He marries a Sidonian princess, Jezebel, who I will talk about a little more in today's text, and he begins the worship of her faith, her God. He builds an altar and a temple to Baal. Baal was a fertility god, a god of rain, and that is the reason why we are told in chapter 17 that God sends Elijah. Yahweh is my God. That's what Elijah means. Elohim, Yahweh, is Jehovah Jireh. Jehovah, so is my God. So Jehovah Jireh is God is my provider, but Yahweh is my God. That is the meaning of the word Elijah. Now, we are told that God sends Elijah. We saw this yesterday. Sends him to tell Ahab that there's going to be a period of famine, and that is the reason why God also sends him to the Wadi Cherith. Cherith means to be cut off. So Elijah was to be cut off more because his life would have been in danger from the very people whom he brought the famine upon. In God's name, he brought famine upon the land, and obviously they were going to be utterly mad at him. So he is in Cherith. And that's where our text really takes off today, because that stream, that Wadi, also begins to dry up. In this Wadi Cherith, God provided him with food in the form of bread and meat in the form of, in the evening he had meat which was provided by ravens. And we know that ravens were for a Jew an unclean bird. So the stream where the text of today, verse 7, tells us that the stream where he was, the Wadi Cherith, now dries up. And then God, the word of the Lord, comes once again to Elijah. He says, up and go. You know, when I read that, I thought so much of the prophet Jonah. I said yesterday, God is in the business in the relocation business. He's been relocating everybody in the Bible. And we see that he relocates the prophet Elijah. He says, up and go. But he also relocated Jonah, if you remember. He said, go down to Nineveh. So straight away, where is God sending Elijah? He is sending him to Zarephath, a Sidonian town. Now, Sidon, as I said, was the hometown and country of Queen Jezebel, who was a worshipper of Baal. We know that her father's name was Baal, and God is sending him straight, literally, into enemy territory, into the territory of Baal. Now, for those of you who don't know where Sidon is, if you look at the map of Israel and go further north along the Mediterranean Sea, that's where you would have those famous cities of Tyre and Sidon. And Zarephath was between those 2 cities of Tyre and Sidon. Now, the focal point really of our teaching today is trust and obedience. Obedience by Elijah, he was called to obedience, and trust was this Syrophoenician, the Phoenician woman, the Sidonian woman of Zarephath. So he is sent to a widow. Now, of all the things, God sends him to a nobody, because at the time of Jesus, widows were the lowest class. In fact, they were protected by the book of Deuteronomy, but this is a Sidonian woman, so we don't even know what rights she had. And we know that she has a son. He's gone, Elijah's been sent right into the heart of famine country. And it is here that he is to seek help. In fact, God says, I have ordered a widow to give you food. So she already knows that God has spoken to her. Does she accept Yahweh as a God? I don't think so, because she says, as the Lord your God lives. So she recognizes Yahweh, but perhaps for her, Yahweh was still not her God. And so on reaching Zarephath, on reaching the city gates, he addresses the woman. Now, I like the tenderness with which Elijah asks for things. He says, please bring me a water vessel, and please, he said, bring me a scrap bread in your hand. So he's not a demanding prophet. And in this sense, I want to say that those of us who bear the burden of being ministers of God must be polite. You know, when I was in St. Stephen's, one of the first things I announced was, I said, there must be a culture of politeness. My dear late friend Father Larry always said that the gift of ordination doesn't give a priest a right to scream and shout, and sometimes we do this. And you can see that this great prophet, he was the greatest prophet among the Jewish prophets, is a polite one. He begins with please. And he's asking from a widow when she has absolutely nothing. In fact, she says to him, she says, as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I have no baked bread, but only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil, and I'm going to gather some sticks and prepare a meal for myself and my son, and then we shall eat and we shall die. And I think that summarizes the reality of a lot of people who are poor. You know, poverty is a very real thing, and I don't think poverty, should ever be glorified in any form. We tend to glorify poverty, but it's a harsh reality. And the duty of the church really is to care for the poor. I've always said this, there are no poor churches in Bombay City. I don't know about the others, but I'm convinced that even a parish like St. Jude Malad East, which was in the slums and where I ministered for 10 years, had enough and more to care for all our poor. And believe me, we had a sizable population of financially challenged people. So the job of the church is not to amass money. You know, many years ago when the former finance minister imposed upon all charitable trusts in India a rule to spend 85% of their annual income, it was based on very clever logic, which said, you are a charitable organization, so why are you hoarding? Your job is to spend on the poor. And I think that is something that we should insist on, not amassing money. The worst thing we can possibly do is end up as charitable trusts paying taxes on unused money. Yeah, that for me it's happened in the church, it's sinful, it's sad, and it needs to be called out. But coming to Elijah, this woman who knows she's going to die, she says she's going to die, and obviously she's afraid. And you hear Elijah say the words that we find, as some scholars say, 365 times in the Bible, those famous words, do not be afraid. Now, ask yourself, why is something repeated so often in the Bible? I don't know whether it's 365 times, but it's repeated several times. Why is something said so often? Because, fear is a lived experience. We all live through fear. I'm heading to the airport. I hate airports. In exactly an hour from now, I'll be heading to the airport. I don't like airports. We always live in fear. And God knows that we don't fully trust Him. We profess a trust, but it's easy to talk about trust in hindsight. When the storm is over, we say, God saw me through. But while you're in that storm, very often fear overtakes you. And that is the reason why God says so often, do not be afraid. We know the end of this narrative, that the meal that she prepared never ran out. There was enough and more. It was a miracle. So God provided, for a non-Jew, and that's the point I want to make. We often think that God only provides for us because we are Catholic, we are Christian. God provides for all his children. He gave this woman a miracle in the midst of a famine. He gave her manna himself. So, yet the irony is he also starved his own people because they were disobedient, because they rebelled against him. Now, just to leave you with one or two reflections. The first, I think we need to celebrate the generosity of the poor. I often make an encouragement for people to give more in charity. And sometimes I say, I think those who are blessed with much aren't as charitable with the poor. And I can prove this more than ever being in several parishes. But we need to celebrate the generosity of the poor. And very often, some of the largest contributions, and I don't mean financially, but I mean percentage-wise of someone's salary, comes from people who are financially challenged. They may even amount to a few coins, but we need to celebrate the generosity of the poor. Secondly, this lady gave of her all, she gave of her best, and I think that's what we need to be doing constantly when we relate with people. Not just giving of our worst. I don't like this culture of giving away our old clothes. Of course, today we live in a culture where most of our clothes, I wear second-hand clothes, the clothes are such good quality. But this tendency of, and I can say this with confidence, I have received as parish priest bundles of clothes, unlaundered, unwashed, and even with underwear inside. Yeah, and that is something that is terrible. If we give, try giving the best. Yeah, and finally, I want to say this: who's the widow of today's narrative? Who's the hero? Of today's narrative? It's the widow. Yes, it's about God. Yes, it's about Elijah. But celebrate this widow because she had nothing and she gave her all. She was an outsider and a foreigner, and she was open even to Yahweh and all that God could do for her, and God delivered. I leave now in an hour's time for the airport. I hopefully will record tomorrow when I reach Goa. I'll record for Wednesday of the 10th week. So somewhere along the way, I'll prepare on the flight, and I'll see you again tomorrow evening. Bye, everybody. Keep well. Don't forget to like and share this video and leave your comments.